Good afternoon. From Silvana Pavlovska and In Focus. This afternoon, we're going to continue the academic paper we started a while ago titled The Prespa Agreement as Cultural Genocide of the Macedonian National Identity towards the termination of an illegal treaty. The author of this paper is Prof.d-r Igor Janev. And we are going to now continue with the next section of chapter 4, 4.3, the Prespa Agreement, Tirana Platform, with bilingual reform and the impact of harmful treaties to possible dissolution or disintegration of Macedonia, a destiny of former Yugoslavia, or beyond the derogation of national identity. I'm going to read from the actual printed copy of the text, so please bear with me. I'm about to start. So, in order to understand the harmful effect of the Prespa Agreement, for short the PA, beside the Bulgarian Treaty for Friendship, which was done in 2017, and its synergistic consequences with the PA on human rights violations, we should emphasize here on the destructive impact of the Tirana Platform. The Tirana Platform is in quotation treaty that was a strategic deal among the Albanian parties from Macedonia, concluded in Tirana on the 7th of January 2017. And made under cooperation of the Prime Minister of Albania, I. Rama. In that agreement, 3 Albanian parties from Macedonia, from the state of Macedonia, unanimously agreed that they will provide for a legislative passage in the Macedonian parliament a systemic law on bilingual usage of the Albanian language as a second official national language, along with the Macedonian language. At that time, the Albanian parties from Macedonia, so they call themselves Albanian parties, they are Albanian parties, and they happen to be existing in Macedonia. They had already known that Zaev will become the next prime minister, the PM, and that he will most certainly conclude a treaty with Greece over the renaming of state's name at any cost. The Albanian parties successfully brought Zaev into power as a head of the Macedonian government, under his promises to enact the bilingual law and condition to advance ethnic Albanian interest in Macedonia. After Zaev, in June 2017, after he became the prime minister, he had to realize the enactment of the promised law in favor of the Albanian minority, who, as we said, installed him as the prime minister in the state of Macedonia, and basically demonstrated that he is a dependent person on foreign influences, writes Professor Igor Janev. Coalition Zaev's partner in the new government, that is the DUI, that's the Albanian party, had pushed Zaev's Socialist Democratic Party, or SDSM, headed government to pass that fundamental law in parliament. And that happened despite the objections of all legal and constitutional experts. The PM, Zaev, let's have a look, 143, yes, we are on the right page. So the Prime Minister Zaev and his government had passed conditionally the law on the 18th of November 2017. So the law was passed on the 18th of November 2017 with the promise given to the members of parliament to send the law to the Venice Commission for the final check and future corrections of the act if needed. The Venice Commission, on the other hand, with the respect of that law, found insufficiency of the legal grounds for the law in the constitutional framework. Zaev had been apparently blackmailed by the Albanian parties and acting as dependent person, in fact, as an agent. Under his decision, SDSM government passed a bilingual law against all the public and people's will and under protests of opposition in the parliament for voting only with simple majority. The result was 66 for and 41 against. Constitutional experts suggested 2/3 majority for the process, since the question was related to the constitutional matter that required qualified majority. After the enactment of the law, contrary to his initial promise that he will respect the decision of the Venice Commission, Zaev had broken that promise and didn't make any changes in the law, giving Albanian populations in Macedonia entirely new legal status under the Macedonian constitutional law. It should be noted that Zaev's coalition was largely based on the Tirana Platform deal of 2017, in which Albanian parties, coordinated by the Albanian Prime Minister, this is the country of Albania's Prime Minister, Rama, a foreign country. Oh dear. So I shall repeat this sentence again. It should be noted that Zaev's coalition was largely based on the Tirana Platform deal of 2017, in which Albanian parties, coordinated by a foreign power, the prime minister of a foreign power, set forward their demands and the law on the usage of the Albanian language as a second official national language in Macedonia. Venice Commission found that the law goes far beyond the limits provided in the Macedonian constitution. Nevertheless, the Macedonian Deputy Prime Minister, ethnic Albanian Bujar Osmani from DUI party, who defended unsuccessfully the law before the Commission, said that the bilingualism law will remain intact, despite the opinion of the Venice Commission. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. This is me, Silvana, saying unbelievable, not Professor Dr. Igor Janev. As a result of the forceful imposition of that legislation, the United Macedonian movement arose against illegal creation of the second nationality, transforming minority into people nation, obtaining statehood capacity under the Macedonian constitution. At the end of 2017, after the process in the parliament ended, the president of the Republic of Macedonia, G. Ivanov, had explained why he refused to sign that bill on languages to become effective law of the land. He said that, and we quote, "The way in which it is written, the law on the use of languages would completely block the work of our institutions. There is almost no article in that law that doesn't violate some article of the Constitution of the Republic of Macedonia. It was adopted in the parliament in violation of its rules and procedures." End of quote. And he also added, quotation, "The Macedonian language is a lingua franca of the country, which helps members of different communities understand each other. It is part of our societal contract. Our force is in our diversity, and our diversity is guaranteed by the unity we have. An expression of that unity is the Macedonian language. If this unconstitutional law is put in effect, then the Macedonian language will cease to be the lingua franca uniting the Macedonian society." End of quote. Remarkably, Albanian parties within the Republic of Macedonia, well coordinated, had a strategy for that situation by veto by the president too. First, the law was adopted with simple majority by the parliament, and then blocked by the president G. Ivanov, and then was voted and adopted with simple majority for the second time. That is again in the Macedonian parliament, according to the constitutional procedural requirement in the case of President veto, and President Ivanov again refused to sign it after the second round of voting and adoption. Then the Speaker of the Parliament, Talat Jaferi, an Albanian from Kosovo, with alleged criminal activities and offenses, Talat Jaferi has been announcing he will sign the law if Ivanov continues to refuse to do so, even if by doing so, Jaferi as a speaker would breach the constitution, acting in violation of his jurisdiction. Finally, the Speaker of the Parliament did so. So he did it. Jaferi did it. We know that he did it, and had signed the law despite its illegal character. And then he, as the Speaker, instead of the President of the country, sent it to be published in the official bulletin in order to enter it into force. I mean, this is just ludicrous, isn't it? Silvana providing a commentary now. I mean, where does this happen? Where does this happen in the world for a speaker to be making, laws and doing things that are against his power, against the jurisdiction given to that position? But we now know that the whole idea was to push this language as an official language. And so you've got these people who are of Albanian background, all in positions of high power, ensuring that the Tirana Platform takes effect in the Republic of Macedonia. Would the Americans allow that to happen? Would the UK and Britain allow that to happen? Would France or Germany or Italy or Greece even allow that to happen? What do you think? After the publication of that act in the official bulletin, it indeed became the law of the country. It was a clear example of an ultra vires act committed by the Speaker of the Parliament. The relevance of this cause with an illegally imposed bilingual law to the Prespa Agreement process is that the same scenario happened when the President of the Republic of Macedonia, Ivanov, refused to sign that bill, including constitutional changes. Ivanov admitted that he was under strong pressure to sign it and commented, quote, "I won't be intimidated," end of quote. Then again, the Speaker of the Parliament, Talat Jaferi, the Albanian from Kosovo with a criminal record, had signed the bill, despite the constitutional requirement that such laws and constitutional changes must be signed only by the president of that country or state. The official bulletin published it in order to enter it into force after Talat Jaferi sent it to the bulletin for publication. Apparently, the Speaker of the Parliament, Talat Jaferi, demonstrated a flagrant criminal behavior and laws and constitutional changes needed, in fact, to be nullified by the Supreme Court. Remarkably, due to judicial composition of the Supreme Court of basically party system elected judges, neither in the case of the bilingual law nor in the case of the Prespa Agreement, the Macedonian Constitutional Court didn't react properly to nullify the law or the constitutional changes or procedures or amendments related to the Prespa Agreement that were results of ultra vires acts. In both cases, bilingual law and the Prespa changes, all Albanian parties were united in making or in applying pressure to the lawmakers and the President Ivanov personally. And on the other side, we also noticed that all pro-Bulgarian elements in Bulgaria, including a father of the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Nikola Dimitrov, who signed the Prespa Agreement, sociologist Professor D. Dimitrov, supported the Prespa Agreement and the constitutional changes for renaming the country and the nation. After the registration of the agreement in the United Nations Secretariat, the Bulgarian administration became the strongest supporter of the new name. The new name for the Macedonian state and its people, including North Macedonians, denomination. And in fact, they became the first country that used such denomination for Macedonians and or the Macedonian nation. By the Prespa Agreement, identity of Macedonians were a reason, says Professor Igor Janev, and that gave opportunity to Bulgaria to fulfill the gap with the imposition of the Bulgarian identity to newly created artificial or abstract nation. It should be noticed that Talat Jaferi from the Albanian party DUI, who openly violated the provisions of the Macedonian constitution, was one of the military insurgents commanders of the UCK or the NLA that started, waged and controlled civil war in Macedonia in 2001 between the ethnic Macedonians and the Albanians, who were motivated by the idea of creating a greater Albania. The 2001 insurgency in Macedonia was an armed conflict which began when the ethnic Albanian National Liberation Army, UCK or UCK in Macedonian militant group, formed from the veterans of the Kosovo War and the insurgency of the Federal Republic of Yugoslavia. They attacked the Macedonian security forces at the beginning of February 2001, and later that war ended with the Ohrid Framework Agreement. A chain of events, all connected to achieve what they've achieved to this very day. Silvana commentary. That agreement actually represented a defeat of the Macedonian security forces in part of the Macedonian territory. What we found as relevant is the fact that party leader of DUI, Ali Ahmeti, was also commander in the NLA UCK, and that all members of the presidency of DUI were fighters in that war that ended with victory by the Albanians, who achieved victorious compromise agreement or deal with the Macedonians, represented by their political parties, particularly SDSM in the name of Macedonia. In fact, all fighters coming from Kosovo at the time had the agenda for creating a great Albania and naturally not preserving the state of Macedonia. So they had ulterior motives. That DUI, this is the Albanian party in the state of Macedonia, then and now, as a coalition partner of the Social Democrats Party, which is in power, had a plan for Greater Albania, that is, to divide the territory of Macedonia. This plan was proven later as a truthfully credible threat when Ali Ahmeti Dui, from Dui Party, openly in public pressured for the Albanian Prime Minister the Prime Minister of Macedonia to be of Albanian background. A kind of the security situation where Albanian parties encouraged the violations and breaches of the constitution and openly called for Greater Albania was only possible without proper reactions from the opposition party Vreme de Pămâne and the security forces, since apparently Macedonians were generally afraid of the new civil war with even worse consequences. The Albanian party in Macedonia, DUI, pressed the Prime Minister, or applied pressure to the Prime Minister Zaev, for the next Macedonian Prime Minister after him to be Nasser Ziberi from a minor ethnic Albanian party, PDP, a party even more radical than DUI itself, and known to be in close relation with Iran, and according to many experts, ISIS, ISIL, or Al-Qaeda. Other two Albanian parties, Radical Party BESA and Party Alliance of Albanians, also had more radical approach than DUI, advocating extreme reforms toward achievement of the common goal that threatens the territorial integrity of Macedonia. Not surprisingly, all Albanian political parties in Macedonia supported the current pro-Albanian president of Macedonia, Stevo Pendarovski. He's still the president, unfortunately. Not for long, though. He'll be out of the door very soon. Coming back to what Professor Igor Janev is writing here. Not surprisisingly, all Albanian political parties in Macedonia supported the current pro-Albanian president of Macedonia, Stevo Pendarovski, Macedonian from the SDSM party, who won presidential election in Macedonia. And as a compromise with Zaev, DUI agreed that the new Minister of Foreign Affairs will be Bujar Osmani, and that Zaev may keep his current position as a prime minister. So in other words, they made all these deals of who is going to be the prime minister, who will be the next prime minister of Albanian background. And this is like reading some kind of a tragic drama. Unfortunately, it's all true. And the facts are here in Professor Igor's paper, The Prespa Agreement as Cultural Genocide of the Macedonian National Identity towards the termination of an illegal treaty. That was a compromise in order to prevent a new prime minister from PDP to become the head of the government. Not surprisingly, a few days before the local elections scheduled for 17th of October, the Prime Minister Zaev started promising to the Albanian factor that after current Macedonian President Pendarovski, ethnic Albanians will get the first Albanian president of the Republic of North Macedonia, if Albanian parties gave him support in local elections. My goodness, all sorts of deals were made for self-interest. So promises were made that to the Albanian parties that they will get an Albanian, ethnic Albanian from Macedonia to be the next president of the Republic of Macedonia. If the Albanian parties gave him support, Zaev, the then prime minister, gave them that promise. He was trading with the state, with the people, knowing well that it was against the people's will, it was against the constitution, detrimental to the country and the region, mind you, the Balkan Macedonian Peninsula. Not surprisingly, Bulgaria is the second most influential Macedonian neighbor and factor in actual control of the Socialist Democratic Party, backed Zaev's decision with respect to bilingual law, along with the strategies for disintegration of Macedonia publicly presented from ethnic Albanian parties. The Bulgarian government in 2017, after the conclusion of Tirana deal, that is the Tirana Platform, as they call it, predicted that Macedonia under future government will disintegrate and that Albania with Kosovo will take the western part of the Republic of North Macedonia so that their diplomacy may act promptly after the inauguration of Zaev in order to secure that in the case of future succession and division of Macedonian territory, Bulgaria will take the central and eastern part of Republic of Macedonia. Most alarming. Zed Zaev assumed office as the prime minister at 31st of May 2017, and his first international decision was to sign the Treaty for Friendship between Macedonia and Bulgaria. He didn't waste any time, did he? Despite the fact that Bulgaria didn't recognize the Macedonian language. The Bulgarian strategy was aimed to place a bit later in time special conditions related to the identity, but only after the Prespa Agreement was finalized and the Macedonian admission to the EU actually was put on the agenda. Bulgarian plan was to fulfill the gap of the national Macedonian identity. Once the Prespa Agreement nullify or delete the most of it. As predicted, the Prespa Agreement didn't explicitly regulate the matter of language, except for the fact that all national adjective needed to become north-sized, and in that treaty, language of Macedonians basically was left to be additionally redefined by Bulgarian treaty-based conditions for the EU. What seemed to be a compromise in the Prespa Agreement in favor of the second party, that is not specified provision for language, was in fact well-coordinated item matter between Greece and Bulgarian diplomacy, so that the national language eventually will become Bulgarian language after the final compromise act with Bulgaria. So the gap is in quotations, the gap of national identity had to be entirely fulfilled by the Bulgarian national identity, transforming artificial North Macedonians once again. For that reason, the Bulgarian diplomacy was silent for a reasonable period of time, and suddenly in October 2019, after the PA registration in the United Nations, they revoked the Bulgarian treaty from 2017 and based it on a new set of conditions that needed to be fulfilled in order for Macedonia to obtain a date for starting the let's have a look. We are moving on to the next lot, starting negotiations. So here we go. The fact that Macedonians let's go back to the last sentence, which is, so the gap of national identity had to be entirely fulfilled by Bulgarian national identity, transforming artificial North Macedonians once again into some other, into the Bulgarian. For that reason, Bulgarian diplomacy was silent for a reasonable period of time, and suddenly in October 2019, after the Prespa Agreement registration in the United Nations, they revoked the Bulgarian treaty from 2017 and based it on new set of conditions that needed to be fulfilled in order for Macedonia to obtain a date for starting negotiations with the European Union. Wow, lots of ultimatums here, lots of bribes. In that light, previously adopted bilingual law actually served as an element for further destabilization and destruction of the Macedonian identity, especially taking into consideration that after the Prespa Agreement, the ethnic Albanians refused to declare themselves as North Macedonian. Isn't that interesting? The ethnic Albanians in Macedonia refused to declare themselves as North Macedonians, or even as the citizens of North Macedonia. Therefore, we may derive that Bulgarian government found useful and apparently powerful ally in the Albanian factor in Macedonia. And in my opinion, according to Professor Igor Janev, in my opinion, Bulgarian and Albanian states most probably achieved a sort of a non-formal or secret agreement or deal for territorial division of the Macedonian state and territory and land. From an analytical point of view, the ethnic Albanian parties, with all their social and political force, pushed the Macedonian government to complete the negotiations with the Bulgarians and with the Greeks, and signed the agreement with Greek people, with the Greek government. And when the PA came into force, they refused to be called North Macedonians or Macedonians in any combination, and insisted that their nationality may only be Albanian, although they supported a new state name and the new identity only for the Macedonians. Exactly the same situation and Albanian behavior we may observe in the present negotiation process with Bulgaria and their extreme demands. In order to speed up negotiating process, the Minister Osmani, Albanian background, Albanian ethnic background, Buira Osmani requested that ethnic Macedonian expert in the joint Bulgarian-Macedonia Commission on History be replaced with ethnic Albanian historian expert. Wow. In order to avoid conflict with the Albanian party DUI, under constant pressure, Zaev, the prime minister at the time, accepted it and was actually prepared to give up all disputed items that he possibly could with respect to the national history, including the language, the culture, and even publicly to admit or confess that the Macedonian language is in fact a Bulgarian dialect. But even Zaev's comprehensive offer to satisfy all Bulgarian cultural, historical, and linguistic demands finally didn't yield any result or compromise. Macedonia remained firmly blocked by Bulgaria in its path to the European Union. Basically, negotiation process with the Bulgarians only confirmed fears that Bulgaria have more extreme and in fact territorial ambitions disguised as identity issues in a very similar way as Albanian territorial aspirations that were more transparent against the Macedonian territory. Namely, from time to time, ethnic Albanian politicians in Macedonia as their final goal. It appears that, namely from time to time, ethnic Albanian politicians in Macedonia as a probe balloon placed their strategic idea, especially in their media in the Albanian language, related to federalization or confederalization of Macedonia as their final goal. So they wanted to divide the country and get a greater proportion of the land. It appears that these real threats didn't concern the then Prime Minister Zaev, who in his style tried to make a joke of it and commented that he's not afraid since we are in NATO. End of quote. In conclusion, says Professor Igor Janev in his paper, The Prespa Agreement as Cultural Genocide of the Macedonian National Identity, published in 2023, in conclusion, the negative consequences of the Prespa Agreement transcend the mere human rights violations and the rights of the state mentioned, such as sovereignty, independence, and non-interference in domestic jurisdiction. And as we have explained here, that wrongful treaty affects the national security and the very existence of the state itself. After the registration of that treaty in the UN, the Bulgarian campaign of extreme nationalism started and endangered the stability and survival of the small, peaceful Macedonian country. Rhetoric such as to burn North Macedonia if this country does not change its identity, statement by A. Kovachev, see previous chapter, were usual messages sent from Bulgaria on almost daily basis. In a coordinated way with a couple of others, the Bulgarian politician and Minister of Defense, now former K. Karakachanov, said that Macedonia's future is to either become an Albanian province or join Bulgaria. Really? They were making decisions on the part of a foreign country, namely Macedonia, of what should happen to it. You know, what divisions are going to take place according to what they've decided. Namely, Karakachanov revealed a long-term Bulgarian strategic policy aimed at territorial annexation of Macedonia when he said, quote, "There is a future. I have talked to several Skopje politicians and told them that they have two alternatives. One is to join Albania in 20 years and become an Albanian province, and the other is European integration, normally within the frames of a Bulgarian state." Wow. So they had their plan. End of quote. He also, in a separate statement, gave support for the Albanian accession to EU, but not for the Macedonian path, saying that, quotation, "There are enough problems in the EU. Nobody needs a new problem in the Balkans if it is not solved in a normal way," end of quote. He also compared Macedonia and its laws to Nazi Germany, and its laws. I wasn't aware of that statement. So this man, a Bulgarian man, Karakachanov, Minister of Defense, or whatever he was then, this is what he expressed publicly to the Macedonian people. And yeah, he gave support. So the Bulgarian government gave support for the Albania accession to the EU, but not for the Macedonian country accession to EU. Yeah, he also compared Macedonia and its laws to Nazi Germany and its laws. That is very serious allegation. In an unsuccessful attempt to make a joke, he lectured the Macedonians about identity of the Tsar Samuil. Quotation, Macedonians can also call themselves Martians. Will that mean that Tsar Samuil is from Mars? End of quote. Plus many other of his statements, such as those that Macedonians were unable to understand anything. Wow, very undermining. Among other messages, he will probably be remembered by the Macedonian people when he promised to send the Bulgarian army to Macedonia. To some extent, statements from Bulgarian eccentric politician Karakachanov resemble the above-mentioned statements by Greece Minister of Defense Kamenos, who threatens that he could occupy Macedonia in 20 minutes. This statement only demonstrates how wrongful was UN Security Council when they treated Macedonia on equal footing with Greece security capacities instead of rejecting the one-sided Greek demands for illegal admission conditions. On the other hand, as mentioned previously, the Albanian extremists that are actually sitting in the Macedonian parliament and government pose a real threat for survival of the state and the nation. Former President Ivanov for the Russian media Sputnik said that, quote, as the Islamic State has been losing territory on the battlegrounds in Syria, in Libya, a vast share of these people try to return, or some who reach the EU territory together with migrants might try to take such action, end of quote, and added that, quote, intelligence and law enforcement agencies were on alert and were closely monitoring those returning from Syria and the regions affected by the activity of the Islamic State terrorist group, outlawed in many countries, including Russia. Ivanov said that at least 86 people had so far returned to Macedonia from these regions, end of quote. In addition, Sputnik, the Russian newspaper Sputnik, also reported that Kosovo, the breakaway region of Serbia on which borders with Macedonia, has been called a fertile ground for ISIS by the New York Times. It reported on May the 21st, 2016 that, quote, over the last 2 years, the police have identified 314 Kosovars, including 2 suicide bombers, 44 women and 28 children, end of quote, have gone abroad to join higher than any country in Europe. Residents of Kosovo are predominantly ethnically Albanian and Muslim. Approximately 1/4 of Macedonians were Albanian Muslims, according to the country's 2002 census, and the minority predominates in the northwest of the country. During President Ivanov's visit to Moscow on the 9th of May 2017, in the morning of the 9th, terrorists, mainly from Kosovo, passed the border with Macedonia and attacked the village of Divo Naselje, and more than 20 people were killed there. Many analysts thought that such attack was a clear message to President Ivanov not to try to side with Russia. Macedonian Prime Minister Nikola Gruevski said that, quote, Macedonian police have performed the most complicated operation, and the police forces, with officers from all ethnic groups, have performed a professional, heroic, and patriotic operation, end of quote. As we noticed above, President Ivanov additionally lost his popularity among the Albanians when he refused to sign the bilingual law, and especially when he refused to sign the Prespa Agreement that was in the interest both for Bulgaria and the ethnic Albanians. Namely, if we analyze the collective effect of all 3 troublesome instruments, that is the Bulgarian and the Prespa agreements and the Bill on Languages, We may conclude hypothetically that if the identity of the Macedonians become completely assimilated or transformed into a Bulgarian one, the only official language will become the Albanian language, since North Macedonian will become Bulgarian. Then, taking into account that there's no Macedonians left, the Albanians will take the western part of Macedonia or even more territory, and the rest of Macedonia will join or merge Bulgarian territory as a newly composed nation of Bulgarians. Analyzing from that point and taking into consideration the bigger picture, the Prespa Agreement may not be classified only as the act providing cultural genocide, but also harmful, unjust treaty that threatened territorial survival of the Macedonian state and its people and nation, literally or physically. What we found similar between Bulgarian and Greek tactics and strategies is remarkable capacity of both of these countries to predict future developments with respect to Macedonia and to a special behavior of the Macedonian government, especially the behavior of the Macedonian government. In 2017, the Bulgarian diplomacy predicted the rise of Zoran Zaev as a prime minister, and as a consequence, his accomplishments in the name change foreseen by the Bulgarians. As for the Greek diplomacy, they skillfully predicted dissolution of the former Yugoslavia in 1991. And before that happened, the Greek government in 1987 created 3 administrative regions with the name Macedonia. 1, Eastern Macedonia and Thrace, 2, Central Macedonia, and 3, Western Macedonia. Notably, before 1985, those units never existed. There were a ministry for Northern Greece in the structure of the Greek. There was a ministry for Northern Greece in the structure of the Greek government until the administrative reforms creating the 3 Macedonian regions in the late 80s, 1986 and 87. That part of the Hellenic Republic was simply called North Greece. So the Greek government foresaw that after the dissolution of Yugoslavia, one part called Republic of Macedonia will become an independent state and could endanger their cultural and touristic monopoly on ancient history. As a reaction to that future development, naturally, the Greek government decided to change the name of their administrative provinces and try to monopolize ancient part of history, and particularly Alexander the Great as exclusively a Greek national. After that, their government, first in the EU, 1992, and later in the UN, 1993, have complained that this new candidate state has the same name as their provinces, and that new country must change its name. Furthermore, the Greek government in the UN Secretary Council sold a story that this new country committed theft of their name and history and represents security risk for the region. The ambassadors in the UN Security Council didn't realize the proportion of those absurd and basically naive allegations, apparently lacking knowledge in international law and a real military power and capacity of the Republic of Macedonia. And the concept that some nations falsely represent themselves only to become a member of the UN, or that this was artificial nation stealing other names, was equally prosperous as a deceiving stories of its might or capacities to destabilize a regional security. After the dissolution of Yugoslavia in 1991, the army leaving the Macedonian territory for Serbia didn't leave any usable arms or valuable pieces of artillery. For most people from the former Yugoslavia and people who lived in Macedonia, it was well-known fact that a very small number of Macedonian army staff even didn't have the military uniforms for every soldier, not to speak about the scarce equipment. Macedonia at that time didn't have any military aircraft and not even enough army personnel to protect the borders with their neighbors. So the United Nations Security Council made a resolution based on naive and fake assumptions and misleading opinion that a name of the country per se could pose a credible national security threat to Greece. Such assumptions from present time experience discussed in this study especially aggressive statements of the Greek and Bulgarian ministers of defense, as we've already shown and read, appear to be ridiculous. The Greek army and air force were then in 1993, as well as today, immeasurably stronger than the symbolic armed forces of Macedonia. In fact, indefensible state that actually proved to be unable even to police a territory of the western part of Macedonia under rule of ethnic Albanians, extremists, and paramilitary groups from Kosovo and Albania. Well, I think we have covered quite a lot of ground. I might stop here and we will continue this particular part in our next broadcast in a few days' time. Just a reminder for all of you watching and listening to In Focus with Silvana Pavlovska that we are presenting to you the latest scholarly paper from Prof.d-r Igor Janev, an expert on international law, author of many books, and the title of this latest publication is The Prespa Agreement as Cultural Genocide of the Macedonian National Identity towards the Termination of an Illegal Treaty. This is a publication published, as I said, in 2023 by AGM Knjiga Beograd Zemun. And recenzenti are Professor Dr. Mile Rakic, Dr. Dragan Markovic, Scientific Advisor at the Institute for Political Studies in Belgrade. And there were some 300 copies published of this particular publication. All rights are reserved. This is a copyright material. However, I have been given permission in writing by the author to make this known to you publicly via our program In Focus with Silvana Pavlovska. So on that note, thank you very much for your patience. I hope that you've been able to follow all this factual information presented to us by this professor. And I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next few days. Bye for now.